You're listening to the Fitzrock Podcast, interviews where we explore the shifts and transitions of life. Here are your hosts, Keith Rock and Don Fitzsimmons. Hi, everybody. Today we get to interview Skye Wagner. Skye is a life coach at A Little Motivation, and she's also co-founder of the Lion Team, which we'll get to find out more about. Her focus is on helping women regain their sense of self, to help them find their true, unique style and flavor and express it with confidence. So, Skye, welcome to the podcast. We're really glad you're here.
Thank you.
Skye, so glad to have you here, otherwise known as Nala, right?
Yeah.
So you want to explain a little bit about that and how you've actually relocated to here and what you've been doing in life?
Totally. Okay, so Nala, that comes from obviously the character on The Lion King. And that is a nickname that I have in our community called the Lion Team that I do with my partner, Alan Little. And what that is, it's a huge community that is focused on like-minded people and connecting like-minded people who are very positive and community-oriented and just want to connect with other like-minded people. The basic thing that we want is to connect others with others and create a foundation, a community that can be sort of like a family. And that is, that's like a summary of what the Lion Team is. Lion stands for Love Influences Others Naturally, and that just gives you a pretty good idea of like what we're about. And that has grown in the past year to a lot. Right now we're at 4.3 thousand members. This time last year it was at just over 1,000. So it's become a thing where we have different events, we have a whole moderation team, and we also are going to be having coaches, like lion coaches, as part of the Lion Team. And I'm also a coach. So I've been coaching within organizations and some on my own, but I've been coaching and experiencing people for over 10 years now. And I was living in Florida most recently, and I moved to here, the Kansas City area, to be with Alan and to start my life fresh out here. And I can honestly say it's been a very, very cool experience. I definitely feel at home already here in the Kansas City area, but I moved and I'm getting myself out there and I'm connecting with a lot of other like-minded people.
So you talk about like you were trying to help empower women and that kind of thing. You want to tell us more how you did that and how you're doing that going forward?
Yeah, so basically one thing that I found and I've experienced personally is that a lot of women will put other people before themselves. And that can be, a lot of times that comes up in the family dynamic. It can be like the kids or the spouse. I've also seen it where it's their parents or like other family expectations, especially for younger women. And in some cases it can be community or just based on what they think they're supposed to be. And in the process of that, and because of their life experiences, and because they've decided that they care so much more about other people than themselves, they kind of lose sense of their own identity. And I can say that I've honestly experienced a bit of that on my own, which is what makes me so passionate about it, because I know what that's like, where you kind of feel like it's selfish to even try to be yourself. But then the rest of the world kind of misses out on who you are and the special gifts that you have and the uniqueness that you have. So it's definitely not selfish, but I understand how that goes. And so I have been, I've coached a lot of people. I've coached men and women, but I've found that a lot of it comes up more with that specific situation, comes up a lot more with women than men, I've found. I've worked with them one-on-one to find exactly what their blocks are. So what that is varies person to person, like what it is, what the expectation is that they're trying to live up to, what ideas they have about themselves are supposed to be. And in some cases, there is some handling they have to do a bit with the relationship of whoever it is that's influencing them to go against their own identity and not be themselves. And now I'm continuing to do that. I'm meeting with women, working with them. I have several clients out here now that I'm working with to help identify exactly what that is. And whatever is, it's interesting because, like I said, a lot of women do have that situation, but what the actual block is, it's not the same person to person. Like I have I've run into many people who had the idea of what they needed to be in order to make their relationship work. I've even had a couple clients who have determined their entire career path based on how can they make their relationship work with their husband, and it has nothing to do with what their personal goals are at all, or even what their skill set is at all. And I've also found women who've been in a relationship situation where they feel that they're too trusting. And so then the end result is that they kind of wall up and they feel a little bit afraid to fully express themselves or be themselves again, because they don't want to get hurt again. They don't want to get into that same situation. So it really it varies person to person, but it is something like when I work with them, I find out and go deep on like, okay, what exactly is happening with that individual in front of me and what do they need? And then we go from there.
Do you mind sharing with us some of the blocks that you experienced that caused you to feel like your voice should be silenced?
Yeah, I can tell you one thing just about me. So for me, I think the biggest source of it was just my concept of what other people thought I should be. I was adopted at birth, and then my family situation has been very spread out. And I love my family now. As a result, I have like a really, really huge family. But why that's pertinent is because I'm biracial. I'm mixed races. So I'm half Black, I'm half white. My adopted family is entirely white. So I grew up in that environment and I don't look like them. Like everyone in my family, I don't look like. So my entire life growing up, I had to, if I had a friend come over from school or something, and then when I got into my teenage years, when I started dating, if my boyfriend would come over or whatever, I would have to give them like my story ahead of time. Like just, hey, even though this is your first time coming to my house, I have to explain to you, here's my personal story of like why I don't look like my parents and I'm supposed to look like them. But also for me, identity wise, and especially as a woman who cares about like appearance and stuff like that, I would run into difficulty figuring out what I was supposed to look like and trying to sort of fit into a box of the community that I was surrounded in. And that was a little bit uncomfortable. The other thing I'd run into is sort of like ethnic wise. I wouldn't fit into either group. And I grew up in a very diverse community, so I was really fortunate about that. But sometimes I would experience racist reactions from both races. And for me, all of that just kind of got me thinking too much about myself. Like I was very, very in my head and really like, okay, so this is, I don't want to offend this person. I don't want to act like something I'm not, but I don't really know what I am. And that was kind of like my growing up. I had a little bit of that going on. And that's something that I can look at now easily, but I can tell you right now, like my parents are super loving and they had no idea that all of that was happening in my head. That was just sort of something I was going through growing up that I noticed stuck with me a little bit into my early adult years. It translated to way more than just my appearance. I'm also a very creative spirit. I'm very, very creative, but I'm not necessarily a fine artist. So I love artistic things and I can appreciate it, but I personally, like, I don't paint, I don't do sculpting. I like the kinds of things where it's like applied, and so this would be things like style comes into play there, but also just even how you decorate things. I've always been really into interior design or making cards or things that are like a little bit more hands-on that you use. But I would kind of put myself up against kind of, I don't want to say snobby, but sometimes I come across snobby art types that are very like, it has to be a certain way, whatever. You're critiqued a lot. I got involved in theater, amazing teacher, but he critiqued everybody very heavily. So what ended up happening was I kept getting into these groups where my own differences and my own uniqueness started to be rejected by just not even a lot of people, but just that right person in the right frame of authority. And then I started to feel like, oh, actually, I'm not competent. I actually am not an artist. I'm not creative. And I started denying all these things for myself. And so I went probably I'd say about 10 years without doing almost anything creative at all, because I had decided somewhere along the line to just deny that part of myself because I wasn't getting the approval that I wanted from the people that I wanted. So it took a little bit of breaking through to overcome that. Yeah, I mean, I think some of the biggest things for me was teachers and directors growing up. And then in my early adult years, sometimes it would just be like that one boss, that one manager, that one person with a lot of weight that would just say that thing to me. And I'd be like, okay, I need to change, or this must be true. And so then I would try to, I found myself trying to find out what somebody wanted or understand what they wanted and try to act accordingly rather than just being myself.
Sounds like a lot of self-reflection. What were some of the things that you did to kind of overcome these blockages?
I mean, I personally went through, I've had my own counseling, my own coaching that I've received like as the recipient, that helped a lot with that. And then there's just a lot of, honestly, things that I decided like, cool, I'm just going to do this anyways, even though I'm feeling all these mental restrictions. And then after I pushed through the fear and pushed through that, then I kind of was able to look back on it and be like, oh, okay, cool. I actually had no reason to. And so I'd say there's a lot of personal work that I did on myself prior to getting into this specific niche of coaching. Because it's like, I feel like it's one of those things that you can't really get through by yourself. So I've definitely had a lot of people working with me. I've had a lot of very cool mentors. I even had one mentor that was specifically on the area of arts and creativity that kind of helped me to get over those blocks.
So it sounds like, my gosh, you've had a lot of different things and challenges you faced in life.
Mm-hmm.
So through all those things, what are some life lessons you've learned that you could share with the folks?
Okay, so one life lesson I learned is that about mistakes. And I learned very much that mistakes are something that you make, not something that you are. And that if you make a mistake or something goes wrong in the past, it's in the past and you can grow from it. I think that everyone obviously deserves a second chance, but also it's good to know, like, okay, so if you messed up once, that's kind of how you grow, you know? It's like when you're a kid learning how to ride a bike and you fall off a bike, you don't just stop riding bikes forever. You get back on and keep going. So that's one thing that I learned. I also learned that it's really important to appreciate the people around you and realize that, you know, I learned that I actually am surrounded by, family-wise and with my friends, people who really love me a lot. And I think there have been times when I've personally felt like that wasn't the case, or like they didn't care or something, and then not gone and asked for help when I needed help until it was too late. And so I think that that is a lesson that I learned, is like, okay, people really do care about me and about what's going on. And sometimes all it takes is just a good communication and a good, like, hey, this is what I'm running into. Can you help? Do you have any ideas? And people will be more than happy to help you. And that, you know, we can kind of grow together and go further together than we can alone.
Do you ever have some of those old tapes, even now, creep back into your mind? And if so, how do you overcome them now?
I do sometimes, and pretty much for me, the biggest things that pop up are usually in relation to other people. Sometimes I still find myself a little bit like, okay, I think this person's going to be mad at me, or they're not going to like that I'm doing something, or like that I'm proposing a question. Or the person in charge is thinking that I'm trying to undermine them or somehow be in charge myself or something like that. And some of those things will pop up still, because I've been around people who really do react that way. And so what I have found, what works the best, and I can honestly say that my boyfriend Alan has helped me a lot with this, is to actually communicate and not assume that that's the reaction that you're going to get. And just say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And even if it's like, hey, I'm a little bit concerned that I might come across as pushy, or I'm a little bit concerned that you might be upset, but here's kind of what I'm thinking, and have a very easy communication, as opposed to going into the reaction of the thing that you're afraid of that hasn't happened yet. I think for me, that's the biggest thing, is I have always had a tendency to like really, really overthink things. And so then I assume the worst when the worst isn't even going to happen. So that is like one thing that I'm really still working on.
So some of those life lessons that you've learned, sometimes your default place is to go back to the old self. So just because you've learned something doesn't mean you're never going to struggle with the old stuff again. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's continuous growth.
So one of the things that you're talking about that I think is a common thing for all of this is, unless we have clarifying conversations, we can often put ourselves or another person in a really bad position because we assume that something we're reading or there's something they're saying is they mean something negative, when in actuality it could either be positive or neutral. I don't know, do you ever come across that, especially if it's written like a text or message or anything like that?
Yes, I've run into that a lot. Definitely, you're right. Like on the written, like texting and emailing, there's way too many things sometimes that can get misconstrued. Um, and if you like react, of course, it's going to be really hard to resolve when it's not a live conversation. And then, yeah, in person, I think it's like sometimes someone can say, "Hey, I think it would be better if you did this," and it's easy to take that as, "Wow, you think I suck. I can't believe you just said that. And that must mean I'm really horrible," when the person is like, "No, actually, I think you're great. I just think this one thing could be better." One thing that also comes up like on that same vein is sometimes I would get a lot of unsolicited advice. I think people get that. I think unsolicited advice is a normal thing that people get. And I always used to have a thing about it like, okay, well, it must be because I'm young. You know, I'm 30 years old, but I am on the younger end of my generation of siblings and cousins. And so I've always had a thing of like, oh, I'm not a baby because I've always felt so young, right? So I've always been like, oh, they're giving me this unsolicited advice because I'm young. They think I don't know what I'm doing. But just recently I found out that a lot of people are giving me advice because they actually have faith in me and they think I have value and they think that I can actually do something with the advice that they're giving me. And then I thought about it and I was like, you know, that's true. I've never given advice to somebody that I think won't take it or can't do anything. Like if I actually thought so badly of a person, I would probably not give them advice. So, but I think so many people are quick to jump on that, like, oh, it's negative, rather than just actually communicating and finding out what the person really intends.
That's such a great perspective to have. And, just to check things out before assuming is a great life lesson that you can use in every area of life. An awesome perspective. So, Skye, the Lion Team, you told us a little bit about it.
Mhm.
How would one become a member of that?
So it's on Facebook. Like it started as a Facebook group, and you just go to the Lion Team, or you can go to facebookgroups.com/the Lion Team official. And you just click join and you just answer a couple questions. And then it's as simple as that, and you can join. And pretty much the premise of it is you have to pretty much agree with that positive movement and the concept of love influencing others naturally. And people from all over the place, different countries even, are a part of it. And you know, it doesn't really matter what your background is or what your religious beliefs are or anything. Everything is totally welcome. So that's pretty much how they would join, is just do that. And then if they're not on Facebook, because there are people who want to be a part of it that might not have Facebook, we do have an Instagram, but then also in general, we are having events and stuff like that. So if they go to thelionteam.org, they can find out more about that.
So if I agree to this perspective
Mm-hmm.
and I subscribe to it and I join the Lion Team,
Mm-hmm.
how does that group help me carry that out?
How it helps is that there's a lot of different things that we do throughout the week. Like there's different videos. I do a video every week. Alan does a video every week. And then there's other things throughout the week that get done that give good motivational wisdom and things like this. But then also there's a lot of other people, and everyone in the group is allowed to contribute to the group, right? And what we have people post is things like introductions of themselves, or stories or testimonials, life lessons that they learned, things like that. It's definitely not like a business promotion zone and by any way. It's definitely very personal. And then we encourage people to actually connect with other people. And so it provides a couple of things. It provides some real human connection with like-minded people, which I think has a lot of value, but especially these days after the pandemic, like all happened and now where we are now, people actually are wanting to connect with others, especially on the positive end of things. But then also it's a safe space for you to communicate yourself. And if you need help, you need advice, you know, we've even had people post in there, hey, this is my kind of situation. How does anyone have any advice of how to get out of it, or any help or whatever? And, without even any assistance from the moderation team or anything, other members just chime in, and they're actually working together to help each other.
That's amazing. So as we wrap this up, Skye, what are a couple of things that you would just want to say to the audience that you want to make sure that you get across to them?
That's a really good question. I would say, one, that community is important, and it's important to appreciate your friends and your family and the people around you, and know that together you can go far and further than alone. Another thing I would say is that there's a lot of good knowledge and wisdom all over the place, and to keep learning and growing. It's important. It's like, obviously there's so many different writers and books, etc. So it's important to keep in mind, like, what resonates with you. That's what's true. But I would also say to continuously learn and grow in life, and your life will be very much more rewarding if you continue to learn and grow as a person. And then lastly, I would just say, be yourself, and just be unapologetic about yourself. And if you do that, you'll be surrounded with people who love you for real, for who you are.
That's awesome, Skye. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
We are very grateful. Hey, Skye, before we go, what is the best way for people to contact you should they want life coaching or anything else?
I am on social media. I am on Facebook, Skye Wagner. I'm on Instagram at SkyeNoel90. And I am on LinkedIn. And then otherwise they can email me, skynoel.w@gmail.com. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again. And I'm sure people will be reaching out to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fitz Rock Podcast. The music you are hearing is Swim with Wild Musical Instruments by Your Mind Music. Copyright 2019 and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial License. Until next time, have a fantastic life.